What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the third EP by Kutt Calhoun. Basically, this project is called Cuttin' Loose, and it came out in the summer of 2015. Now, the thing about this particular project is this is after Kutt Calhoun's tenure with Strange Music, Tech N9ne's label. Basically, Kutt Calhoun had been with Tech N9ne's label for about 10 years, between about 2003, 2004, and about 2013, 2014. He managed to drop a series of projects. A lot of them are pretty damn good, or basically about all of them are pretty damn good, I would have to say. It's just got some real good appeal about some of that stuff, and I definitely enjoyed the days of Kutt Calhoun and Tech N9ne. But from the sounds of it on this particular project, it sounds like initially it was kind of said that Kutt Calhoun left Strange Music on kind of amicable terms, but on this particular project, it sounds like he was almost maybe not full blown bitter, but just a little bit maybe salty about it in certain senses as far as that kind of goes. So I would have to say it's interesting, but he does stand on his own 2 feet on this particular album, and it just does a lot of damage. This is actually an album that's going to get a rave score, and I would probably say that this is just overall I would just have to say that overall this is probably one of Kutt Calhoun's absolute best. Like, some of my favorite projects by him would be Feature Presentation and Raw and Uncut, but this is definitely one that's up there with that. And in some cases, I mean, the thing about Feature Presentation, that's probably one of my favorite Kutt Calhoun albums, but this is probably the better one to that, even despite the fact that that had maybe some, I mean, I do feel like Feature Presentation definitely had some gems and bops on there as far as that kind of went, but this is actually a pretty classic project here. And it's just interesting, just out of nowhere in 2015, without Tech N9ne, without Strange Music, without really any big name kind of affiliation, without any real big name kind of affiliation, that Kutt Calhoun was able to nail this project as well as he kind of did. So that's interesting. He managed to he put out 2 singles, 2 music videos. One was Kutt Calhoun put out 2 music videos. One was Hands Up, Shut Shit Down, and the other one was On My Own, I Got You, and both of which did pretty damn well. I just would have to say, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this EP is going to get a 10 out of 10. It's just that damn good as far as that kind of happens. There's a lot of good things to kind of talk about as far as this particular project kind of goes. There's some good stuff as far as that kind of happens. Just interesting just because the concept of it. The strange thing about this project is just the fact that it's just kind of a random and just kind of out of nowhere kind of burst of energy that just happened to happen. Because like Kutt Calhoun on the song Guillotine talks about the fact that he kind of came back from the dead. And that's kind of the concept about it. Was initially after he left Strange Music, there might have been folks who thought he wasn't going to be able to bring it back and kind of do things after Black Gold, which was a pretty solid album. Black Gold was pretty good, but I do feel like this is probably the better project. This nails it better. Black Gold was a pretty solid project, but I feel like this project just probably nails it better. But it's just interesting just looking at the fact that Kutt Calhoun was able to buck the trends of supposing that he was going to be sunk in the this album was able to buck the trends that Kutt Calhoun was going to be sunk in the water without Tech N9ne as far as that kind of happens. It's definitely not the case. So I just would have to say, for folks who have messed with Kutt Calhoun on the Tech N9ne days and are just kind of curious about it, I know it's kind of 8.5 years old, but I would still have to say that this is a worthwhile project to kind of check out and just overall fuck with. So it's definitely kind of the concept about it. But there's basically 8 songs on this particular EP, and out of those 8, I recommend 7. So the only real song I don't recommend out of these 8 on here is just Regal. And talk about Regal real quick. I mean, this one was trying to be kind of like a personable, kind of Tech N9ne like ruminating type song as far as that kind of happens. I just kind of felt like the production was kind of depressive, a little bit kind of like autumn-like, and just kind of like somewhat kind of gloomy as far as that kind of happened, but it just didn't nail it as well as like Tech N9ne and folks like that normally kind of do. It's just pretty much like the only real dud on here. I mean, I kind of felt like Regal almost kind of had like a haunting, kind of ruminating type beat as far as that kind of happened, but I just didn't quite see the pitch as vividly as what was probably necessary. So it's kind of the concept about it. That's really like the only real true misstep on this particular project. The other 7 songs work extremely well. Talk about some of the singles on here, like Hands Up, for example. This is a pretty potent kind of lead single, I would have to say. Hands Up, Shut Shit Down is kind of a potent, kind of chilling, almost horrorcore-like beat, I would have to say. It's a real talk song about mistreatment, police brutalities, that type of stuff, and it's just a creeping kind of hit. I definitely feel like Hands Up is a pretty important song from Kutt Calhoun, especially over the concept of police brutality. This is the stuff that Ice Cube and folks like that used to talk about back in the 80s and early 90s as far as that kind of happens. It's definitely a good concept to get definitely a pretty good concept to get folks like Kutt Calhoun kind of talking about this sort of thing as far as that kind of happens. Just a good concept, just him talking about that he'll take the law into his own hands as far as that kind of happens. Just a good concept, just a real twinkling, kind of sparkling kind of beat that just is a pretty vivid type one that almost feels horrorcore. It's just a real kind of glitzy kind of night beat that just has the potent and chilling type feeling about it, but this works pretty damn well. This is an overall nice one about trying to initiate change as far as that kind of happens. Just a good bop. And the other song that kind of had a music video for it was On My Own, I Got You. Basically, On My Own is kind of a demonic, dramatic, crisp evening flair of a song, I would have to say. It's got a haunting composition, definitely. And it's just a stock cut hit going for Dolo from him, I would have to say. So this is a pretty nice one. Just an overall thrilling kind of one, just an exhilarating, kind of haunting almost horrorcore like beat. It's another kind of one that just has that very kind of autumn like, just gazy kind of. It's another one that kind of has that autumn like kind of doomed kind of feeling just about it, just in like a real kind of ghoulish type feel as far as that kind of happens. And this, the thing about this is it's not really horrorcore in terms of the lyric composition, but it just has that dramatic kind of feel about it that just works extremely well. It's just one that's just kind of, there's a lot of real talk songs in this particular album. There's a number of ones, like I feel like Hands Up, Shut Shit Down is one, State of Emergency is kind of one, Shooting Gallery can almost be one, and then like On My Own is one that kind of has some of those concepts. But the thing about this particular song, On My Own, is just the fact that he kind of talks about the strange music stuff as far as that kind of happens, is the fact that he kind of said that he didn't need the help and that sort of stuff as far as that kind of happens. Just him kind of saying that he can do it by himself, and he proves it. And that's definitely kind of the concept. It's definitely some interesting aspects. I remember just a few years prior to this, I kind of felt like I was kind of curious if he really could do it without Tech N9ne's help. It took me until very recently to finally mess with this project to be able to say as to whether or not that's the truth, but I'm glad that it is the case that he can continue to kind of have some hits minus the Tech N9ne stuff. So I just had to say it's a good concept. This is a really, it's probably one of the best beats on the album. On My Own, I would have to say it's just an overall nice one. Another highlight on this particular album is On Fleek, and that's pretty dope that Kutt Calhoun knew of this phrase, because this was a phrase that was kind of uttered by, I mean, this is one that probably was said in like Atlanta and places like that, like in 2011, 2012 and stuff. It's just interesting to kind of have this flesh out way out in Missouri type fare. It's interesting for phrases like On Fleek to kind of flesh out Missouri type fare as far as that kind of happens, especially around 2015. It's just a good concept. It's kind of before the times as far as that kind of happened, but yeah, this is kind of a warped, kind of glitzy, smoke a few cut, I would have to say. It's a nice house party roll up kind of cut. Definitely, it's a good song to roll up to and hit the scene on and that sort of thing, I would have to say. This song is some vivid night flash for socials, I would have to say. So it's just a good concept to kind of have here. This is definite nice one to kind of have. Just really like the warp kind of just overall sprawling kind of this like slinky kind of beat as far as that kind of happens. Just a very kind of dismantled kind of one that just works pretty well. It's just a very nice nightclub bop as far as that kind of happens. If you could still hear Kutt Calhoun in nightclubs, not to say that you couldn't, but just the concept, just because of how low key he is and that sort of stuff. It's just a good concept to kind of get this, but it is pretty nice warped kind of beat to kind of have on here. It's probably one of the album's better beats in terms of nightclub flash, I would have to say. Another kind of nightclub bop on here is Guillotine. This is definitely kind of a misty, kind of murky resurgence cut, I would have to say. It's just a nice, this song is like a nice, gloomy nightclub snap of a song, I would have to say. And it's just vintage Kutt, and like this song is vintage Kutt Calhoun, like his strange music days. So this one just kind of has like a strange music type hook. I originally thought that that was more Tech N9ne's appeal as far as that kind of happens, but it's just interesting that some of these, there's a couple songs on here, like Guillotine is one. There might be like another one that I can't remember that kind of has that same sort of pitch that he kind of did with the Tech N9ne days, as far as some of those kind of warp hooks that sound like something that Chris Calico or those type folks would do as far as that kind of happens. There's just some good ones on here that kind of have that. It might be, there's another song on here apart from Guillotine that kind of does that sort of thing. It's just a good bop. But a real surprising highlight on here that just has a lot of nightclub and strip club kind of pizzazz on here is Fuck With You the Long Way. This is a real nice one. This is definitely a pretty good ladies bop. Just a Fuck With You the Long Way is definitely a pretty good ladies bop. This is kind of a jittery strip club hit. This is kind of a jittery strip club hit, definitely. It reminds me of a DJ Mustard beat, and it's got a nice, and this song has a nice, fun bounce vibe about it. So this is just a particularly nice one. This is another one of the album's best beats, I would have to say. This really kind of feels like something that's R and bass and that type of stuff, or just kind of more ratchet type music as far as this kind of happened. I'm glad that Kutt Calhoun was able to pull off this particular style. It's just interesting because he's not on like the Tech N9ne kind of strange music, kind of independent grind, just to see some of the things that he could cook up as far as that kind of happens. I definitely feel like this album has better production than Black Gold did from 2013. It's just interesting that he got this new severe burst of energy like he did. It's a pretty good concept. And then Shooting Gallery. Then Shooting Gallery is kind of a pounding stunt song, I would have to say. This is a nice vehicle traverse gleam, I would have to say, and it's just some night out pizzazz. And this is some night out pizzazz, definitely, and it's just a regular kind of fly night, I would have to say. So it's just a good concept to kind of get this one. This is definitely kind of a boppish kind of one. Definite good stunt song to kind of have. This is just a good one for a vehicle gleam. This is an excellent stunt song, probably one of the most jazzy songs on this particular album as far as that kind of happens, just with like some vehicle traverse in mind, as far as like a good pull up song and that type of stuff. Just a good slow cruise and just kind of flash your vehicle, that type of stuff. Just really kind of has some stunt type vibes and just overall kind of pizzazz of just being out and about and just really like being ritzy and that type of stuff as far as that kind of goes. Just kind of primping as far as that kind of happens. Just a good song to primp to and that sort of stuff. Good concept for that sort of one. Definitely good. The thing about Kutt Calhoun, he does have some guests on here. It's just kind of the concept about it. He does have some extra cats in some of these songs that kind of help with this sort of thing. It's just a good concept to kind of get. But these, I mean, they're low key, folks, as far as that kind of happens. But these are still pretty good night pizzazz type songs. I feel like songs like Guillotine, Shooting Gallery, On Fleek, and State of Emergency all have these particular pizzazz. And then Fuck With You the Long Way is like a nice strip club type tune as far as that kind of happens. So there's just a lot, there's some good bops on here, I would have to say. And then State of Emergency is another nice one. This is a snazzy kind of nightclub pizzazz, I would have to say. It's a real talk song about suspect kind of music. And by suspect, I mean kind of effeminate men as far as that kind of happens, just in terms of the concept of like the skinny jeans and things like that that are just kind of more suspect as far as that kind of happens. It's a good concept of a song. And it's just a nice evening hit, I would have to say. So yeah, there's just a lot of good night appeal as far as this particular album kind of goes and such. Just has a lot of good vivid flashes as far as that department kind of happens. Just would have to say there's a lot of good bops on here just in that sort of assortment. Just some vehicle pizzazz, just some night out flash, just some good concepts of kind of having like a strip club, night venue, some stuff like that, just going out. So yeah, I would have to say this album is pretty vivid in terms of its night appeal. Just has a lot of good concepts as far as stepping out and just overall having the flash and pizzazz of just having a good time as far as that kind of happens. Despite the fact that some of this is kind of food for thought and different concepts as far as that kind of happens, it's just a good assortment of just having some times proving that Kutt Calhoun didn't need Tech N9ne and stuff like that. He was able to do some of these. He has like the hits and songwriting abilities as far as that kind of happens. Maybe the only real problem with this project is just the fact that it doesn't really have any big name guests, I would have to say, but it does have some other rappers on here as far as that kind of happens. Maybe they're more local, but apart from that, this EP gets a 10 out of 10. The social score, I'm going to give a 10 out of 10 also, just because the overall appeal of this project is pretty high. The social appeal of this album is pretty high. It just overall has a lot of vivid kind of gleam about it. Just a lot of good aspects, some good night out songs like Guillotine, Shooting Gallery, State of Emergency, On My Own, On Fleek, Fuck With You the Long Way. Even Hands Up kind of has that appeal. So 7 out of 8 songs on here are just great for night flash, and these are pretty relevant in Liddy times. It's contemporary. Just has a lot of good stuff going down for it. Just has a lot of good. This project just has a lot of overall affable appeal that just shines through. And this is probably one of Kutt Calhoun's most presentable projects, minus the fact that it just doesn't have the big names on here. If you can deal with the fact that it doesn't have Chris Calico, Tech N9ne, Stevie Stone, Brother Lynch, some of those type people, I would definitely say that it does have a pretty good concept of just having that appeal. So it's just kind of the concept. I would just try something different, fuck with it, see what's up with it. If you mess with Kutt Calhoun, but maybe you don't trust the concepts of it, this is a pretty vivid one. This is one of Kutt Calhoun's best. Like I was saying, it's definitely one that just soars. It has a lot of good appeal. So despite the fact that the budget may be seemingly lower, I feel like Kutt Calhoun still has the appeal and overall character to be able to carry projects like this without any real major label support as far as that kind of happens, or independent labels. That's just kind of the concept about it. So in terms of the future, like Kutt Calhoun has dropped. In terms of the future, Kutt Calhoun dropped an album in 2019. I'm going to get to that one soon enough. And then there's also a 2023 EP that Kutt Calhoun dropped. So there is some more stuff by Cutty that I'm going to get to. But this is definitely a pretty excellent project. And hopefully the rest of these projects that I haven't messed with yet are as good as this one. It's definitely got some appeal.